Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm really happy to see all of you. And topic this Sunday is where the rubber meets the road. Or in terms of our faith, in other words, we can think we believe something. We can study God's words. We can intellectually and theologically know the right answers. And these things are actually important. Reading and prayer and intentional practice are really the foundation of a beginning of a life of faith. Because through our daily effort, through daily reading, through daily prayer, we start to absorb, integrate, make like an autopilot for ourselves that more naturally resonates and chooses godly actions. So that our typical responses to challenges and the way we relate to people is in a way that keeps God at the center. So that is good. Reading, prayer, making daily practices, things like a gratitude journal, things like making a goal to serve, this many people in a day or a week. But really living it out, especially when we're in a difficult situation, is where the rubber meets the road. Right? When autopilot doesn't do it for us, how does our faith and our actual life intersect? There are times in our life when we need to make a really important choice. Times when we can't just coast, do things on autopilot, or do things the way we've always done them. And there are times when our faith is really put to the test. Maybe you can think of a time in your life when you've had a moment like that, where you really didn't know what to do, or maybe you knew what to do, but you didn't know if you had the courage to do it. Tough thing about this message is that even if each one of you were to tell me what is going on in your life right now, I probably wouldn't have an answer for you. There are many people in our lives, in this room, who are facing a dilemma, either with their children, their parents, their spouse, your work, your finances. And I can't tell you the answers. But I thought, I could share some of my experiences, times in my life when I really made an intentional choice to live according to my faith, even if it flew in the face of cultural norms, or even if I couldn't see how things would turn out in the end. So I began to think back on my life and the times when I really had to make a tough choice, and to the times when I felt like God really works so drastically or so clearly in my life in big ways. I thought about my decision to go to the blessing, to get blessed to Mike. That was really a God experience. I thought about my showdown prayer with God when I was ready to throw in the towel on my faith and just throw out the baby with the bathwater and be done with it. I thought about the time when I wholeheartedly just surrendered my life to God and my heart and my life. I also thought about the time when I was really angry at Mike and resentful towards my husband, and I just wanted to be right because I knew I was right. And then God showed me how to let go of my pride and forgive. So I think I've shared all of these stories at some point or another. Maybe some of you have heard some of them, maybe you haven't. But here's the thing. As I was reflecting on each one of these experiences, when I was really tested and that I found God working, I discovered something very unexpected. Because I was looking for a time when I made a really intentional choice. But I discovered it wasn't so much that I had two options in front of me and I used my brain and my heart and my will to choose God. So I wanted to start off with this quote. For whoever desires to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. Actually, I realized that every one of these times that I shared about were times that it wasn't so much choosing something, it was a release of something. These were times when I really had to let go of my ego and my pride and really found a sense of surrender. So I realized that these crucial moments, and many times the crucial moments in our lives, are not so much about finding what is the principled way to do something and choosing it and then trying to enact it. For me, it was more of an acceptance of truth, an acceptance and belief in God's unconditional love for me and that God would take care of me in those situations. So I think sometimes we think, like many times Mike and I have shared, that we often say, oh, we chose to become pastors. Nobody asked us to, so we chose to do it. But when we look back, really, we didn't choose it so much as that God was guiding us on this path. And there was a point where we just accepted it, right? Of course, we can choose to ignore God's call. We can be shown a very clear path and we can refuse it. That is a choice. But I think it's not so much of making a decision as like an acceptance of like God is showing me the way. God is showing me the truth, and I'm accepting it and surrendering to it. Here's a quote from 1 Peter. Humble yourselves, therefore, under God's mighty hand, that he may lift you up in due time. Cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you. And I think this connects to the message I gave a couple weeks ago about God's promises, right? And if we really, right, God makes so many promises, and they're like stated over and over again in the Bible. But how much do we really believe that God means what he says is sometimes another question. But I really related to this, that like trusting that God is good, that God has our best interests at heart, and that maybe I don't always know the right answer. I'm not always as in control as I think I am. But that when we can surrender ourselves to God's will or God's plan or God's love, we will be lifted up in due time. Sometimes it's like an immediate release. Sometimes it's like a night and day kind of shift. But sometimes it's in due time, right? We might not always see how God is working in the moment that we surrender, but God will take care of us in due time. And then cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you. That was a big topic of my message last time too. Like, so much of our anxiety and stress and worry comes because we failed to believe in God's promises for us. But maybe you're not at a major crossroads in your life right now. I kind of talked about these times in my life where it felt almost like life or death, or the future of my entire life was going to depend on what happened in this moment. But maybe that's not your situation. Maybe just everyday regular life feels challenging right now. Maybe you have a feeling of, this is just too hard. Or I just wish I didn't have to deal with this right now. Like, if I could just not deal with this, life would be so much better. or just like a general resistance to the situation you're in. For me, that's often looked like, my kids aren't listening. They're really why won't they just go to bed? Or my husband doesn't understand me. Many times for me, this shows up as I feel like something is happening to me that I didn't ask for, and I'm frustrated that I can't just wish it away. Like, why? Why can't it just go away? What do I do then? You know what? I found that actually, at least for myself, the answer is still the same. Acceptance. It really allows us to deal with it. I've shared this story before, but for me it really stands out because it was so extreme in the moment. Was when this was like, I don't know, 8 or 9 years ago. The boys were 5 or 6 years old, and sometimes they would just have really extreme outbursts of emotion. I think that generally they're very just kind of like easygoing and calm and reserved, but maybe they felt like they didn't have a way to express the negative emotions that they had. I'm not quite sure, but there were times when they would just like complete meltdown. And what I felt like was toddler behavior, like 2 and 3 years old, I can accept this, but they were like 5 and 6. But just like, red in the face, shuddering breaths, getting all splotchy, and it wouldn't end. And one of these times happened in the lobby of a Chick-fil-A. And I don't even know, I don't even think any of us knew exactly why. Like, there wasn't something that happened that was wrong or that was bad, but it was some small little thing triggered this like complete release of all of their angst or frustration. And we couldn't get them to go into the Chick-fil-A. We were trying to go in to have a family dinner, and we couldn't get them to go out. We're like, well, let's just get in the car and leave because you are screaming, and there are people here, trying to eat. And I was like, can this just stop? I don't want to be here in this moment. I don't want all these people looking at me thinking I'm abusing my children, or and people are walking through the lobby like, what's going on? And I was like, I just didn't want to be experiencing this right now. I just wanted it to go away. But after a few minutes of it, I think both Mike and I just kind of looked at each other and like, this is happening. Like, we can't go in and we can't leave. We can't wish it away. This is life right now. And we both just like sat down with the kids on the walls of the Chick-fil-A lobby and sat there with them while they just sobbed and cried. We couldn't get them to talk about what it was. But there was definitely a shift when we were like stopped wishing for it to go away and just like, okay, all right, this is happening. And we're going to be here. Well, it happens. I don't know how to fix it, but I'm not going to run away from it. And a few minutes later, they calmed down. I don't remember if we left or we ate. I have no memory of that. But I think it never happened again. I think that prior to that, I was always like, why are they doing this? It doesn't make any sense. Why are they doing this to me? And wanting to like resist it, wanting it to change, wanting it to go away. But it was like our just acceptance of it, and even without knowing what was the right thing to do, but just being willing to be there and be part of it, take responsibility in whatever way we could, I really felt like healed something in our relationship with them, hopefully for them. But it helped me to realize that when we're resisting something and wishing that it wasn't happening, we're actually disengaging ourselves from it. There's a huge separation. When we're disengaged, we can blame somebody else. It's my kids' fault. It's my husband's fault. Society's fault. And we have lots of reasons to point out why it's their fault. But in that position, there's no way that we can actually effectively do anything about it. But when we can accept, okay, this is where we're at. This is what's happening. Then I can re-engage and find, what kind of responsibility can I take? Maybe I didn't start this. Maybe it's really not my fault. But when I accept it and re-engage with it, that's when there's a possibility for something to change. But again, it really comes to coming to a release of ego and pride. Outwardly, we want to blame others, but I think many times if we really look at the root of it, many times we're angry with ourselves. There's something in us that's like, how could I be so stupid to fall for this? Or how did I let this happen to my family? And there's something that inside of us that's actually very upset with ourselves, but we can't accept that, and so then we put the blame on others, and it's a really negative cycle. I think back to the story of Adam and Eve, right? The very beginning. And when Adam and Eve first fell, and then God asked, what happened? And Adam pointed at Eve. She made me do it. And then Eve pointed at Lucifer. He made me do it. Right? That's like a fear that I did something wrong, and so I need to put it somewhere else. But then that's like a disengaging from the whole thing. Our true Father has said many times, if Adam had gone to God and said, I screwed up, I don't know what to do, but I know I did something wrong. God could have forgiven in that moment and very quickly made amends. God could have taken that humility and repaired the family and the relationships then. So it's one of those initial fallen natures, is that pride and ego of not it's somebody else, not me, even though inside we're eating ourselves up because we know that there is something in me. But I think we forget that God is not only a God of judgment, right? God is a God of right and wrong. God can't accept or engage with unprincipled things. But God is also a God of infinite and unconditional love as our parent. So back to that quote. Humble yourselves, therefore, under God's mighty hand, that he may lift you up in due time. Cast all your anxiety on him, because he cares for you. Here's a quote from our founder. When we look at faith and practice, there's always a gap between the two. Faith always precedes practice, not the other way around. Only when fallen human beings have strong faith can they practice it vigorously. But God does not look at faith only. God requires faith as a bridge to a better outcome through practice. I have pencil-written notes on here, but my daughter also put notes on here for me. Almost there. Good job. So I'm trying to sort out which notes I read. But, in the end, I don't have an answer for each person and each situation. But I do really believe that the first step to finding the right answer, the first step to taking the next step, begins with letting go of our pride and our ego, our not like our self, but that selfishness self, right? Being humbled to God's purpose and plan. So I don't know what that looks like for you, right? I don't know what is the challenge that you're faced with right now. And I think that even if we were all faced with the exact same challenge, perhaps the way that it gets sorted out wouldn't be the same for all of us, because we all have our own characters, we all have our own histories, right? We're each a unique embodiment of God, and it expresses different ways. But I do think that the first thing that gets in our way is our pride. I know for sure that Mike and I wouldn't be able to be here, maybe even married anymore, if we hadn't both had moments where we really just laid down our pride, our need to be right, laying down our ego. That in our relationship with our children, it's always a process, right? We're not perfect parents, but I remember very many times where I'd have to go to my kids and apologize to them. Sorry, I didn't understand why you were doing what you were doing. I was just judging based on how it affected me. Or I'm sorry, I overreacted. And when I overreact, it's usually because it's my ego. I don't like that. I don't like to be seen as a parent whose kids react in public, right? So then I overreact, or whatever it is. Like, I feel like there's no way we would continue to mature and grow in our life if we didn't have those times where we let go, and instead gave like a surrender. But I think it also begins with that faith, just what True Father was saying here. Faith is a bridge to better outcome through practice, and faith precedes practice. So I think it's very hard, because our ego and pride is such a huge part of what fallen humanity is. And to let go of that, for many people, that's all they have. I'm a self-made man, or whatever it is, right? I have a pride in who I am and what I've accomplished. And it takes faith to trust that I can let go of that and not lose myself, not lose God's plan for me, right? To trust that it's not nothing, right? There is actually truth. There is actually a path. God has prepared the way. But being able to let go and let that open up, accept that is often the biggest challenge. We think the challenge we're facing is what's happening in front of us. We think it's my argument with my spouse or my financial difficulties. We think that's the problem. But many times the problem is actually more like what's going on in my own heart and my own relationship with God. And letting go, right, of my need to be right, letting go of my pride, letting go of my ego. So I apologize that I did not answer anybody's questions, but I hope that there was something here for each one of you. Please join me in prayer. Heavenly Parent, good morning. Thank you for another week that we are alive. We're on this earth and breathing this fresh air that you've created for us. And in so many ways, we are experiencing your love in unconditional and unending and so many mysterious ways that we don't even see it so much of the time. But I pray that we can take this moment to accept your love for us and believe that you are guiding us in a way, even if it's dark or even if it's difficult. Maybe it's a situation we've put ourselves in, but even so, you are guiding us with our our best interests and best interests of the world in your mind. And there are treasures waiting for us that you want to guide us to. And I pray that we will not be too stubborn or too afraid of losing ourselves to accept you into our life. Please be with us. We know that you are with us as we go through our difficulties, and you see our hearts, you know our fears, you know the challenges, and I pray that we can just trust you with them and work on putting all those words that we've studied and the prayers that we've prayed into practice and really making you the center of our life so that you can guide us more clearly and quickly towards our purpose and to your heart. And I offer this prayer in my name, Michael and Adonia Hendrick, Blood Central family. Amen. And adieu. Okay, thank you.